I was on a road trip heading back from a job interview I had across the states. I stayed for an extra couple days to make it a mini vacation, which was why I drove instead of taking a plane. Anyway, it was pouring outside, which would usually make for a relaxing drive, but it was the middle of the night, so it made visibility difficult. Most of the drive consisted of going through dense forest on long one-lane roads. The drive was supposed to be around 10 hours, and obviously with rain I expected a slight delay. It was just past 1 a.m. when I checked my phone and saw it was 62 miles until the next turn. For some reason though, Apple Maps was taking me on a different route from the way I'd taken before. I didn't see it as a problem at all, and continued for a while, maybe 30 minutes before I glanced over at my phone again. It still said I was 62 miles away from the next turn. I looked closer and my car wasn't even moving on the map. I tried clicking on it and restarting the app, but it was frozen on that screen. To make things worse, all it said was turn right in 62 miles, with no road or street name. Without that, I had no idea where I was going or when to turn, other than a tiny memory of a street name it had shown me before. It was one of those where if I saw the street sign, then I'd recognize and remember it, but I couldn't fully remember it on my own. Despite the inconvenience, I continued driving for a while in hopes that it was just an internet connection thing, and once I was out of the dense forest, it would fix itself. An hour or so of driving later, I was still in the forest and the rain was still pouring down, but I saw an intersection coming up. On the connecting street, there was a truck parked on the side, and I figured they were probably having the same problem I was having. I slowed and looked at the street sign, and to my surprise, I thought I actually recognized it. It could have just been some coincidence or a false memory due to my lack of sleep, but I ended up turning and taking my chances. At first, I was fairly confident in my choice, thinking I might have actually made the right call, but after an hour of driving, I was still in the forest. I knew for sure that I didn't spend even nearly this much time driving through the forest on the way there, so something was wrong. I checked my phone and still had no luck, but up ahead I saw a faint glow of a billboard sign. A motel, right there in the middle of this isolated forest. It seemed like an odd choice for a motel, but I pulled into the parking lot so I could safely figure out my situation. The whole lot was empty, not a single car. A minute later though, that same truck I'd seen back at the intersection pulled in and parked a few spots down. I couldn't see much through the rain, so I just ignored them and continued with trying to get my phone to work. I want to say I probably sat there for 15 minutes before giving up. Just before deciding to go into the motel to either ask for help or get a room, a knock at my window startled me. "Hey, can you help me?" he yelled through the rain. I rolled the window down a crack, letting rain splash all over me as I asked what he wanted. He said he needed some directions and told me a very specific address, as if I were to know where it was. "Sorry man, I'm just as lost as you are." He frowned, then smiled and said to have a nice night, walking back through the rain to his truck. After a minute, I got out and ran into the motel. The front room was dark and empty. Nobody was at the desk. I leaned over the counter to see if someone was in the back, but then the front door opened behind me. I turned and saw that man from the truck outside. He was soaked, with water dripping from his long hair and beard. The look on his face was cold and sinister, and he had one hand suspiciously shoved in his pocket. In that instant, I quickly tried walking past him. He stayed firmly in my way, but for whatever reason, he didn't stop me from squeezing past him and out the door. As I quickly walked to my car, I heard the man exit the building behind me and his footsteps catching up. I got in and turned on my car just as the man came up to my window, and through the rain, I heard the sound of my door latch click. Thank God my car auto locks, because as soon as I heard that and looked up at him, He stared at me with disturbingly rage-filled eyes and began forcefully trying to open the door. He was pulling so hard, the entire car was rocking back and forth. I pulled out and drove off so fast I almost ran him over. I got back to the intersection and sped down the way I was going before. Thankfully, I made it to a city after 20 miles and was able to get help. It turned out the motel I was at had closed down a couple months back, and for some reason the sign still worked, which nobody could explain to me. I don't know what that man's intentions were, and whether or not he had planned that whole thing out, but one thing I am sure of is that I got very lucky with my escape from that motel.